The first time I heard the bones whisper, I told myself it was the wind moving through the shattered cathedral spires. I clung to that explanation as tightly as a prayer, repeating it like a catechism each time I bent over another corpse on the blood-soaked fields of Valoria's End. But then the skull spoke my name, not just the sound of it, my name carried with the same cadence as when my mother whispered it before sleep, years before the guard took me. It was impossible. It should have been impossible. Bones do not remember voices. Bones do not speak, and yet the bones here speak. I am Medicae Sergeant Lorian Hale, 117th Valorian Infantry, attached to the 7th Field Hospital outside the ruins of Hive Sawmill. My official task is simple: pass together what remains of the living, inventory the dead, and burn the unclaimed. My true task, the one no order codex contains, is to bear witness. The Munitorum may hide this record. The Inquisition may redact every word. But someone must leave testimony of what happened when the bones began to remember. The field hospital is a tent of scavenged canvas stretched between cathedral ribs, half buried in ash. The air is never warm. The storms sweep down from the hive's broken towers carrying dust and the stink of blood. Men lie groaning on cots, their eyes darting not toward their wounds, but toward the crates where we store what remains of their comrades. They are afraid of the bones. They should be. I noticed it 3 nights past. A femur, still caked in coagulated blood, gave a faint hum beneath my fingers as I lifted it onto the sorting table. At first, I thought it was vibration from artillery, but the rhythm was steady, deliberate. When I pressed it against my ear, I heard syllables, broken but clear: Credo, Sanctus, Lumen, the litany of faith, recited through marrow. I nearly dropped it, and would have, if the attending priest had not placed a hand upon mine. Father Idrin's eyes gleamed with fanatic light. The Emperor grants his words through the relics of his martyrs. He said, "Rejoice that we are chosen to hear." I wanted to believe him. For a time, I did. I convinced myself that the bones were sacred conduits, carrying the Emperor's voice as blessing to the faithful. But then the others began to hear. Guardsmen whispered of teeth clacking at night with no jaw to drive them. One private claimed a ribcage sang into tones at once, low and high, harmonizing with itself. An orderly found a skull that wept marrow-like tears, and when he wiped them away, the droplets formed letters upon the cloth. Not words from the Lectitio Divinitatis. Words in High Gothic, archaic, unfamiliar. When we brought the skull to Father Idrin, he declared it miraculous. When we showed it to Magos Lex Ether, the Mechanicus adjunct overseeing our supplies, he demanded it sealed for analysis. Their argument nearly came to blows. I remained silent. I was still pretending to believe. The pretense ended last night. I had just finished suturing a corporal whose leg was chewed apart by shrapnel, when I heard my name carried across the tent in a voice like brittle glass. I froze, thinking one of the wounded had called to me. But no eyes followed me. The sound came again from behind, low, rasping, urgent. Lorian, my breath caught. Slowly, I turned toward the storage crates, and there it was. A skull half sunken in rags, jaw split by old fractured lines, its sockets empty. Yet I felt its gaze upon me, and the voice issued once more, no longer brittle, but intimate. "I see you, Lorian Hale." I wanted to run. Emperor, forgive me. I wanted to scream and flee into the ash wastes, but my legs held me rooted, because in that instant I knew one terrible truth. The skull's voice was my mother's. She has been dead 20 years. Her bones left on some nameless world the guard will never mark on a chart. And yet she called to me from the remains of another man. Here, thousands of light years away. It is impossible. It must be. What had happened? Since then, I hear them constantly. Bones cracking faintly in chorus, murmurs beneath the moan of wind. I have begun cataloging the phrases, though my hands tremble each time I write. They speak in liturgical fragments, broken orders, forgotten names. When I touch them, the voices sharpen, as if waiting for me. The others sense it too. Soldiers who handle the bones begin to twitch in their sleep, grinding their teeth to powder, whispering phrases not their own. I sedate them when I can, but the dreams persist. The priest insists it is Holy Communion. The Magos insists it is data corruption in organic substrate. I no longer know what to believe. What I do know is this: the pattern is not random. The words are aligning. Last evening, several fragments joined into a single chant that rolled through every bone in storage. The words, though fractured, formed command. Dig eastward, 3 furlongs, beneath the spine. The colonel dismissed it as madness when I reported, But today, without any formal order, squads began trenching exactly where the chant described. No one told them to. They simply moved, tools in hand, as if duty compelled them. When asked why, each replied the same: the relics require it. The colonel has not stopped them. Perhaps he, too, hears. I feel the pressure building. The bones want something. The more we obey, the louder they become. Tonight the wind is gone. Not calm, not still gone, as if the air itself holds its breath. The temperature has dropped so sharply my fingers ache to hold the quill. The lamp sputters without draft, and through the silence comes the whisper once more, threading through marrow and ash, curling like smoke into my ears. Loran Hale, surgeon of flesh, you are remembered. I am not remembered. I am no one. I tell myself this with every heartbeat, but the bones will not let me believe it. They murmur together now, aligning into a choir, fractured liturgies meshing into harmony. The sound bleeds into the vox net. We cut the power, yet the whispers continue through dead channels. They echo in places where no bones are present at all. It is no longer contained to the remains. It is in the air. It is in us. If this record ends abruptly, it is because the voice grows nearer. I can hear my name spoken from every cot, every crate, every broken rib that juts from the earth. They are waiting for me to answer. Emperor, preserve me. They are waiting for me to speak back. The colonel ordered me to catalog the remains, to treat them as relics of the emperor's fallen. He thinks busy work will calm the regiment, that the fear will lessen if we reduce it to inventory. He does not understand. The act of naming the bones, of recording their whispers, only sharpens them. They want to be remembered. They want to be written into us. Each night I sit at the trestle table with my quill and data slate, the tent thick with the smell of blood and paraffin. I lay the bones out one by one, press the stethoscope against them, and listen. The words are faint at first, a static murmur like the crackle of a dying vox. Then, as my fingers rest upon the surface, they swell into clarity. The marrow resonates with sound that is not sound, vibration that passes through flesh into the mind. Most of the phrases repeat: Credo, Sanctus, Mortem Aeternum, variants of the litany we all know. But sometimes they deviate, sliding into unfamiliar cadences. The rhythm aligns across fragments, as if 100 bones share one voice, one choir. It is not mere echo. They harmonize. Their verses meet at intervals, forming chords. I hear polyphony in marrow. When I write them down, I notice dissonance. The lines look correct until I read them aloud, and then they twist into meanings that should not exist. The priest visits often, watching me work with a hunger in his eyes. He claims the bones are scripture transcribed by the faithful dead. He has begun carrying a rib across his chest like a relic, stroking it as one would prayer beads. The Magos visits less often, but with equal intensity. He brings auspex and noospheric censers, muttering benheric streams as he presses needles into bone. He told me, voice metallic and flat, that the marrow contains geometric patterns not possible in human DNA, fractals within fractals, spirals without termination. His data slate flickered with impossible symbols when he attempted a full scan, then locked to a single word, recursion. I do not know what it means, but the sound of it chills me more than prayer or machine can't. At night the environmental changes intensify. The wind ceases around the ossuary, not a gradual stilling, but an absolute absence. Ash drifts without motion, suspended in the air like insects in amber. My breath fogs, though the thermometer shows no drop in temperature. The soldiers complain of ringing teeth, of jawbones vibrating in rhythm with the choir. One man smashed his own molars out with a mess tin, screaming that he could not bear the humming. Another pressed his ear to the earth and claimed to hear whispers beneath the soil. Tonight I witnessed a femur fracture spontaneously as it lay untouched upon the table. The sound was like ice splitting on a frozen lake. From the marrow oozed not blood, not fat, but a substance like wet parchment, folded and refolded. When I lifted it, the fold separated into letters tiny, etched upon the fibers. The words were half prayers, half codes. The priest fell to his knees at the sight. The Magos tore the sample from my hand, sealed it in a lead canister, and spoke no further. The vox interference has worsened. Last night, the comms array carried faint whispers even when powered down. Sergeant Eldrick attempted to adjust the receiver and recoiled as if burned. He swore he heard his dead brother calling to him. Others confirmed similar voices: lost sons, mothers, comrades long dead. It cannot be coincidence. The voices are reaching through channels we do not understand. They are no longer contained to bone. I tried to resist. I tried to hold to my duty as surgeon, as servant of the Emperor, as rational man. But I too am faltering. This evening, as I walked between the cots, I heard the choir call my name again. Not from one skull, not from one rib, but from every fragment in the tent, unified, resonant. The sound pressed against me like weight, vibrating through skin and sinew, down into my marrow. They called me Lauren Hale in voices of dozens, hundreds, thousands. And then they added a new title, Surgeon of the Choir. I felt my knees weaken. For a moment I almost answered, almost. When I looked around, I saw the soldiers staring. Their eyes were hollow, yet fixed upon me as though waiting for command. They clutched bone fragments like rosaries, knuckles white. Some whispered the chant beneath their breath, lips moving in time with the choir. Even the priest and the magos had fallen silent, listening. I do not know how much longer I can contain this. Already the words seep into my notes without conscious effort. I read back my own writing and find verses I do not recall transcribing. Phrases that direct action, precise and military, form trenches eastward. Align relics at 45 degrees. Bury spine beneath ash. They sound like orders, coded in liturgy. This afternoon. During inspection, I saw it myself. Squads had begun digging, shovels moving in rhythmic unison. No one commanded them. The colonel asked why, and they all gave the same answer. The relics require it. He did not stop them. Perhaps he too has begun to listen. Perhaps resistance is already gone. I feel as if the bones have always been here, that they waited beneath the soil for us to uncover them, that every death in this war is fuel for their choir. I try to remember Veloria before the ossuary whispers, and it feels like a lie, as if the world has always been ash and marrow. Now, as I write, the vox crackles again. The ray is dark, no power rooted, yet static bleeds across the channel. Then the whisper begins, faint but sharp, as if carried directly into my skull. Choir command. That is the identifier. Not imperial code, not regiment call sign. Choir command. The voice repeats coordinates eastward, 3 furlongs, beneath the spine. The same phrase the bones carved in parchment marrow. I cannot deny the pattern. It is not coincidence. It is command structure. The bones are giving orders, and we are obeying. I try to convince myself that this is contagion of the mind, mass hysteria, the effect of stress and loss. But the marrow speaks. The vox repeats. The earth itself hums beneath our boots. No disease could align such detail. No madness could carve such geometry. The soldiers dig still. Their shovels strike soil in time with the chant. I stand watching, quill trembling in hand, as though I am already transcribing their labor. When the trench is finished, we will find what lies beneath the spine. I fear I already know. The digging has not stopped for 3 days. Men who should be sleeping, men with wounds barely bound, rise from their cots as if pulled by string and take their place in the trenches. Their hands blister, their spines bend, but they do not pause. They speak little, save to murmur fragments of prayer shaped by the bones. When rations arrive, they eat without ceasing their labor. When shells fall distant in the high ruins, they do not lift their heads. The earth east of camp is carved now into neat furrows, a geometry that mirrors the sketches I found traced in marrow parchment. None of them studied those fragments, yet they dig as if blueprint rests behind their eyes. The colonel claims this is proof of divine purpose, a sign the emperor guides our hand. He says the relics speak his will, and it is blasphemy to resist. The priest supports him, his voice hoarse from endless sermons about martyrdom through obedience. Only the magos protests, his tone metallic with agitation. He insists the bone phrases are not scripture, but algorithm, command string masquerading as prayer. His Nusfric scans reveal frequency overlaps between vox and marrow vibrations. A network, he calls it, distributed architecture, a choir of computation built from flesh. His words mean little to most, but to me they are explanation enough to terrify. If the choir is network, then every soldier is terminal, every bone a conduit. I see the effects spreading. Guardsmen who carry fragments tucked into their gear sleep less each night. Their hands twitch in rhythm with unheard music. I examined Private Luthen after he collapsed mid-shovel. His heart beat irregularly, skipping then racing. But the rhythm matched the chant I heard faintly from the ossuary. When I drew his blood, I found calcified threads woven through his veins, white against crimson. He should not be alive with such obstruction, yet his eyes glowed with fervor. He whispered to me, voice cracked, the sculptor builds. I cannot record everything. My quill scratches endless notes, but the words multiply faster than I can set them down. Each night new verses emerge, whispering from skulls, from ribs, from the very soil churned by the trenches. The chants are more structured now, no longer broken fragments, orders, coordinates, timetables. Last night the choir dictated the hour we were to halt the dig, though no officer gave the word. At that exact moment, every soldier froze, dropped their tools, and knelt, as one. I stood among them, my heart thundering. For a breath, I nearly knelt as well. The Magos attempted to seize one of the fragments for study. It was only a humerus, splintered with age, yet when he lifted it from the soldier's hand, the choir swelled so loud I felt my skull vibrate. The guardsman screamed, foam flecking his lips, and tore at the Magos with bare hands until restrained. When we checked him, every bone in his body bore new fissures, as if pressure within threatened to crack him apart. He begged to have the fragment returned. When it was placed back into his grasp, the fissures ceased widening and his breathing calmed. The Magos withdrew in silence, though I could hear Ben-Hara curses spilling from his vox implant. I have begun to hear the chants even when far from the ossuary. Out on patrol, through the static hiss of the wind, I catch strains of the same hymn. In the mess line, over the clatter of tins, the pattern persists. The choir has left the bones. It is in the air. Perhaps in us all died 2 nights ago, I made a grave error. I touched one of the skulls too long, pressing the stethoscope against its cracked surface. At first it repeated the same litany as before. Then the tone shifted. The voice grew precise, intimate, singular. It said my name. It told me to take up the quill, to mark its words exactly. My hand moved without thought, inscribing characters I had never learned. When I stopped, the parchment bore diagrams of trenches, angles, and ratios, spirals repeating into themselves, numbers stacking infinite. I stared at the page, trembling, and realized the pattern matched the trenches already dug. I had written their future work before it began. The colonel found the parchment and praised it as divine inspiration. He told the men I had been chosen to transcribe the will of the martyrs. His words spread like fire. Now the soldiers look at me with reverence, not suspicion. They call me scribe and bring me fragments to touch, begging I record their verses. I resist, but sometimes my hand moves to spite me. Already 3 new diagrams hang pinned upon the colonel's board. Already the men dig where I have drawn. I fear I am no longer observer, but instrument. The air grows colder with each passing day. Frost gathers on the crates, though the climate should not permit it. Our breath lingers long in the air, clouds swirling in rhythm to some hidden beat. I find silence unbearable. I strain always to hear the whispers, and when they vanish, my skin crawls as if abandoned. Sleep is broken by teeth grinding, jaw aching from constant pressure. Last night I awoke with blood on my tongue. The edges of my molars cracked as though struck. I cannot deny what is happening. We are no longer a regiment. We are components of something assembling itself beneath the surface. Each order from the choir builds the next, like bones wear upon into skeleton. One feel the design taking shape, though I cannot yet see it whole. The Magos muttered to me this morning, low so others would not hear, "This is recursion. They are building themselves again through us." His optics whirred with terror. It has happened before. The priest interrupted, declaring the sculptor is say reborn, and we must offer ourselves willingly. He has started ceremonies at dusk, leading men in chants that mirror the bone voices. The sound is dreadful in its beauty. Hundreds of throats align with marrow resonance. The camp vibrates with it, tent poles shivering, lamps sputtering. I feel my chest cavity resonate as though my ribs are tuning forks. I cannot resist joining. My lips move with theirs, though the words taste like dust. Tonight the choir reached beyond all doubt. As we chanted, the vox array lit with transmission. No one manned the controls. The power cables were cut hours before. Yet the channel burst alive, filled with layered voices. They spoke coordinates, depth, and the phrase repeated from marrow parchment. 3 furlongs. Beneath the spine dot we have dug the furlongs already. Tomorrow we will reach the 3rd. I write this knowing what we will find is not salvation. And yet I cannot stop them, nor myself. The bones are command. We are obedience. The trench grows deeper. The earth shakes with faint vibration, like breath held beneath the soil. I hear it now, beneath my boots. Something waits below. The 3rd furlong was reached at dusk. I watched them lower themselves on ropes into the cut earth, boots slipping in the clay walls, breath fogging the narrow space. No one gave the order to stop. No one needed to. The choir marked the moment, rising in volume until it seemed the very trench was a throat, and we were descending into its gullet. The soil crumbled in precise layers, as though shaped long before we touched it. When the shovel struck the spine, the ground itself exhaled. At first I believed it was wind, a draft seeping through fissures. Then the draft thickened, became sound, became chord. A resonance climbed through the marrow of the earth, filling the trench with vibration so dense the lamps flickered. The men dropped to their knees, hands spread on the soil, mouths open in silent ecstasy. I felt my own teeth chatter. My ribs ached as if something pressed outward from within. I clutched the trench wall, forcing myself to remain upright. But part of me longed to kneel as well. The spine is no metaphor. I saw it with my own eyes, white and immense, rising from the depths of soil like a cathedral pillar, each vertebra larger than a man's torso, fused with strange metallic sheen. Not fossil, not artifact, but structure preserved beyond natural decay. The soldiers cried out when it emerged, not in fear, but reverence. They touched the bone with filthy gloves, weeping. Some pressed foreheads to it, leaving smears of blood and sweat. The Magos forbade it, shouting Ben Herrick curses, demanding the trench be sealed. His vox emitted static shrieks as he scanned the vertebra with auspex. He told me the density was impossible, that the lattice within was alive with current. His words broke into stutters, as if his voice were being overwritten. I saw his optical lens fog from within, lines of code flickering across its glass. He staggered, clutching his head, before collapsing into silence. When we carried him out, he convulsed like a man in seizure, yet no pulse quickened in his throat. His flesh remained warm, but his eyes were dark. Only his vox whispered, repeating the phrase, beneath the spine. The colonel declared this discovery a relic of holy war, a saint's skeleton preserved by the emperor's will. He knelt before it, sword laid flat across palms, and commanded the men to sing. The priest joined him, voice cracking but loud, proclaiming the sculptor's resurrection. The soldiers obeyed instantly, hundreds of voices blending into the choir. I stood among them, quill trembling, recording the cadence. Every verse repeated the coordinates, every stanza marked by numbers spiraling inward. It was not hymn, but equation. I tested the soil near the vertebra, scraping samples into vials. They vibrated in my hand, grains of dust humming in rhythm. Under magnifier, I saw shards of crystallized marrow embedded in clay. When I placed one on the stethoscope, it pulsed like heart. The sound traveled up the tubing into my skull, and I nearly retched from the pressure. My hand shook so violently I dropped the lens. The shard continued pulsing on the ground, aligning itself to the chant echoing from the trench. At night the symptoms worsened. Soldiers bled from gums, teeth loosening though no decay present. When I checked their jaws, I found small ivory growths sprouting along the sockets, new structures forcing through flesh. Their tongues quivered as if mimicking silent song. They begged me not to remove the growths, insisting they were gifts. The sculptor shapes us, Private Luthen whispered, blood dripping from his chin. We are the new choir. The ossuary tents overflow with bone fragments now, each one vibrating with greater force. They arranged themselves in strange formations overnight, no hand guiding them. I awoke to find skulls stacked in spirals, ribs laid in lattices across the floor. I destroyed one arrangement, scattering the fragments, only to discover it rebuilt within the hour. The soldiers swore they had not touched it, yet their eyes betrayed them. They looked at me with pity, as if I were resisting the inevitable. The Magos has not recovered. His flesh functions, but his mind is elsewhere. He sits upright, unblinking, vox spitting streams of coordinates in dead monotone. I tried to sedate him, but the needle bent against his skin as though his veins were steel. When I pried open his eyelids, I saw lines of script burned across the cornea. Binary, endless, etched in living tissue. He is not man now, but terminal. The priest grows bolder. He walks the trench with bare feet, smearing his blood across the vertebra, muttering scripture woven with bone verse. His sermons are no longer about emperor or faith. They are about pattern, about form, about surrender to the sculptor. The colonel does not rebuke him. On the contrary, he kneels beside him, sword raised as if anointing. The regiment follows without hesitation. I cannot escape the sound. Even with wax in my ears, the vibration moves through bone. Silence no longer exists. Every heartbeat is part of the choir. My own notes betray me. I wake to find pages written in my hand, though I recall no moment of quilled parchment. The diagrams grow more complex, spirals folding into rib cages, trenches converging into vertebrae, ratios converging into symbols I do not understand. When I study them too long, I feel my jaw ache, as if my teeth are being sculpted into shape. Tonight the trench widened to reveal not one spine, but branching column. Vertebrae diverging into ribs that stretch across the soil like cathedral rafters. The men worked until their hands bled, laughter spilling from cracked lips. They shouted to one another as though raising fortress, though no wall stood, only bone. I tried to stop them, begged them to rest, but they only smiled and said, "The work continues." I fear we are not excavating relic. We are freeing something buried alive. The earth trembles more with each layer removed. Lamps sway though no wind blows. Last night, I placed my palm against the vertebra. It was warm, not with stored heat, but living warmth, like flesh. For a breath I thought I felt it expand beneath my hand, as if drawing air. I pulled away, heart racing, but the urge remained. A terrible certainty gnaws at me. If I pressed my ear against the bone, I would hear not him, but breath. And if it breathes, then it waits. And if it waits, then soon it will rise. The first hallucination came after the third watch. I thought I saw the vertebra shift beneath the trench floor, ribs flexing like fingers of some colossal hand. I blinked, but the motion persisted. The men swore they had not touched the earth. I wanted to call it a trick of light, shadow playing against the ashen lamp, but the sensation followed me back to the tent. I heard soft grinding in my sleep, not wood or metal, but enamel against enamel. And in the morning my teeth ached as I forced to echo the rhythm. The trench has grown wider, now curving in unnatural angles. Soldiers whisper about geometry that is not straight, angles impossible for human hands to trace. I have begun to see them too, as if the trench itself curves into impossible perspective when I gaze long enough. The maps I draw from memory no longer match what we excavate. Lines intersect where they should not. Distances stretch beyond measurement. I show the diagrams to the colonel. He smiles with approval. The sculptor guides all. He says, ignoring my unease, "Yesterday I touched a rib while recording a chant." The voice came immediately inside my skull. "Do not forget the spiral." It was not a whisper, but a command, intimate and binding. I traced my finger along the curve, and my mind filled with visions. I saw myself bending over trenches I had not yet dug. I saw soldiers crawling through bone lattices that formed cages. I saw the vertebra rising from the earth to loom over the hive, and I saw my own reflection in the pale ivory, my teeth sharpened, my hands twisted into shapes that were no longer fully mine. I recoiled, shaking, but the vision lingered, burned into my thoughts. The Magos refuses to leave his bunk. He has become terminal, a vessel for the choir. His vox continues to emit coordinates, numbers, rhythms, and all attempts to cut power fail. Last night, the priest brought a skull to his bedside. He took it in trembling hands and spoke in tongues, words fused with Ben-Heric coding. I watched as the marrow etched itself across his palm, forming spirals that wrapped around his fingers like living tattoo. He whispered, "The pattern is whole," and then collapsed, unmoving. Though the pulses from the skull continued, I am not the only one affected. Private Luther now speaks in verses when awake, counting syllables with his ribs like metronome. He traces patterns in the dirt, numbers folded into spirals, calling them the sculptor's law. Soldiers in his vicinity begin to mimic him unconsciously. Even the colonel, stoic as always, sometimes hums under his breath, tracing imaginary diagrams in the air with one hand while the other clutches sword. The chant grows louder every hour, bone against bone, marrow vibrating, teeth grinding. I attempted to sleep last night. The tent was quiet, but I felt it moving beneath me. The ground hummed through my spine. Shadows elongated and contracted with impossible angles, as if the trench had extended beneath the floorboards. I saw the bones moving themselves, rising in columns, stacking like furniture rearranged by some unseen hand. I heard my name whispered repeatedly, over and over, until I could no longer distinguish between living voice and bone chorus. The priest says the sculptor is awakening. He told me to touch the vertebra, to hear its will directly. I refused, though my fingers twitched toward it despite me. I dreamt that my own hands had become vertebrae, segments snapping into alignment with a rhythm older than the hive. My fingers vibrated and flexed as if part of the choir. I awoke to find my hands calloused in shapes I did not remember forming. The quill I held in them scribbled the same spirals and coordinates that haunted my dreams. Communication has become impossible. The vox is alive. The static is no longer background noise. It carries language, instruction, warning. It dictates where men move, what angles they must maintain, how to align the trenches with the vertebra. Those who resist are not punished, only corrected. I saw it happen with the corporal yesterday. He stumbled, refusing the command whispered through the choir. The bones themselves seemed to press him into obedience. He fell to the dirt, crying out, and when he rose, his hands were aligned to the trench grid. Precise, perfect, chanting in time with marrow rhythm. I am beginning to feel it too. My spine aches, vibrating faintly, pulsing in resonance with the buried structure. My teeth chatter along unseen cadence. My hands itch with imagined callous, mapping diagrams I do not consciously draw. I find myself moving my lips silently to the verses, counting syllables with every breath. I am both observer and participant. I cannot distinguish the line anymore. The trench reaches a spiral now, not straight, and I am sure it never began this way. Each segment seems to fold into the next, angles that should not exist made concrete by unearthly forces. The choir instructs the men to maintain it perfectly. One wrong measure, one hesitation, and the sound of teeth grinding intensifies until it is unbearable. I have seen soldiers scream silently, lips moving in agony as the resonance shakes their bones. The colonel looks to me now as intermediary. He whispers, "What does it want next?" As though I hold authority. I have none. I record only. But the voice in marrow, the voice in the trench, in the vox, in my own dreams, compels me to speak. I fear that when I do, it will not stop. The pattern demands completion. The vertebra waits. The ribs arch like cathedral ceilings. The ground trembles. I cannot abandon this. The soldiers will not. The choir is everywhere. The priest spreads his hands in blessing, yet the motion is mimicry, obedient to forces he pretends to serve. The Magos murmurs calculations that dissolve into rhythm. Too late. My quill shakes in my fingers. I am already a participant in the unfolding geometry. I write what the bones demand. Tonight, I will descend into the spiral. The trench narrows. The vertebra looms overhead. I will touch it, hear it, and map it. I do not know if I will return. But the chorus is patient, and the spiral will not wait. The spiral deepened beyond measurement. Each segment of the trench bends impossibly, the earth curling back upon itself as though drawn by invisible hands. I have stopped attempting to map it on data slate. Any attempt produces numbers that collapse into themselves. The soldiers no longer ask where we go, they move, rhythmically, in unison, tracing angles that exist only in marrow diagrams. I follow behind, quill in trembling hand, recording lines that will make no sense to any man alive outside this place. At dusk, the wind ceased entirely, not the absence of breeze, but the absence of air itself, a vacuum that pressed upon the tended camp, compressing our lungs. The choir swelled louder, not a chorus of individual fragments, but a unified command that vibrated through bone, steel, and sinew. I felt my own vertebrae resonate with it, pain lancing from sacrum to skull. Teeth chattered involuntarily, my fingers spasmed, tracing spiral patterns into the dirt. Whether I willed them or not, the colonel stood over the trench, eyes shining. In the firelight, sword raised as if anointing the earth. He gestured to the men, and they fell into their task as the strings pulled from above. No one spoke. All action was dictated by the pattern. Even the priest, usually loud with proclamation, muttered only in whispers, lips pressed to a rib he carried like a talisman. The Magos remained immobile, palms pressed against his temples, murmuring benheric sequences that intersected with the marrow vibrations, his eyes wide, unseeing. I fear he perceives the geometry of the choir, the recursive lattice we build with each shovelful of dirt. I touched the vertebra again today, finger tracing the metallic sheen along its length. The instant I made contact, a vision burned through my mind. I saw the trench not as earth and bone, but as an enormous ribcage suspended in void. Each soldier became a vertebra, their bones snapping into alignment with the great spine. The chant, the marrow resonance, the windless air all coalesced into one instruction, one pulse, one inevitability. I staggered back, nearly falling into the spiral. Yet part of me longed to return, to press my hand against the living ivory and hear the next command. Private Luthen has begun speaking in sequences, numbers interwoven with verses, muttering angles, ratios, distances. He sketches on walls with charred wood, diagrams folding over diagrams, spirals nesting in themselves, triangles forming impossible tessellations. Other soldiers mimic him unconsciously, tracing steps and patterns on the soil. They have lost agency. Only the bones command. Only the choir commands. The Magos tried to warn me yesterday. He beckoned with trembling hands, drawing me aside. "Do not descend further," he said, voice barely audible over the marrow resonance. The spiral completes a lattice, each vertebra, each rib, Each fragment becomes node. You are already part. You will not leave intact. His voice broke into static, words replaced by numerical pulses that vibrated my teeth. He collapsed against the trench wall, quivering. I cannot help him. I cannot stop them. At night, hallucinations are more vivid. I saw the trench lift from the soil, ribs extending into towers, vertebrae curving into spires above the clouds. Soldiers moved along the arcs, walking on bone as though it were stone, chanting in perfect unison. My quill traced diagrams I had not intended, angles too precise to be drawn by human hand. I awoke on the trench floor, fingers bleeding, parchment smeared with blood and chalk dust. The spiral is now recursive, folding into itself, yet expanding at the same time. I feel vertigo whenever I look down its length. The ossuary fragments now crawl into the trench at night. Ribs shift, skulls roll, femurs align themselves into the spiral's lattice. Soldiers where they saw bones float and stack midair, obeying a logic none of us can see. I cannot deny it anymore. The choir is not in the bones alone. It is in the trench, in the soil, in the men. In me. Yesterday, a new phenomenon occurred. As I traced the femur along its axis, I felt the marrow inside pulse under my touch. The pulse communicated not sound but command. Bend, lift, align. I felt myself obey, my wrist rotating as if the bone dictated my muscles. The sensation was unbearable yet intoxicating. I fear tomorrow I will wake and find my fingers fused to a fragment, my mind permanently attuned to the choir. The priest has begun burning rations in the spiral at intervals, offering ash to the vertebra. He chants, the words no longer legible, but felt like vibration in my chest. The soldiers kneel beside him, swaying, eyes glazed. The colonel observes, silent, counting syllables with lips moving imperceptibly. They have become instruments of the pattern, instruments of the sculptor. I cannot stop recording. Every diagram, every angle, every spiraling coordinate must be transcribed. I fear that if I cease, the choir will turn on me, punish me for negligence. I feel my body vibrating in anticipation, teeth chattering, marrow humming. Sleep is impossible. Reality bends. I am already both witness and participant. I see fragments moving when no one is present. Ribs twist, skulls slide along canvas floors, femurs roll into place. Each night they form new sequences, spirals within spirals. I cannot destroy them, attempts fail, and the fragments rebuild. Guided by unseen hands, Private Luthen kissed one femur last night, weeping. The sculptor forgives. He said, tomorrow we reach the deepest layer, the final furlong, the last bend of the spiral. I have seen glimpses in marrow visions. What lies beneath will not be mere bone. I feel it in the earth, in my ribs, in the cadence of teeth and marrow. Something waits, something aware, and it will not be contained by trench walls or ritual chants. I write this knowing the voice is already in me, in my thoughts, in my blood. I tremble as I trace the diagrams that will complete the recursive spiral. The choir grows louder with every stroke. My teeth chatter, my marrow hums, my hands move, whether I will them or not. I do not know if I will survive the descent, or if survival will matter. The pattern will be completed, the sculptor will rise, and I medicate Sergeant Lorian Halem already part of the lattice. The trench is no longer a simple excavation. It folds into itself, spirals overlapping spirals, angles that cannot exist but do. I measured again today, though the numbers collapse as soon as I record them. The soldiers move through impossible corridors of earth and bone, as if gravity itself bends to the choir. I follow behind, quill shaking, unable to stop tracing diagrams that predate understanding. Each footprint leaves imprint in soil that glows, faintly with marrow resonance, pale luminescence pulsing in rhythm with unseen heartbeat. I touched a rib today. It flexed in my hand like living sinew, vibrating in pulses I cannot name. My vision blurred. I saw the trench expand into cathedral halls of bone, the vertebra towering above, dripping shadows that form arches and spires into clouds I could not comprehend. Soldiers walked along ribs like stone bridges, chanting sequences of syllables folded into ratios and spirals. I tried to look away, but my eyes were drawn back, compelled. I felt the hum enter my chest, vibrating through sternum, vertebrae, and teeth, weaving my marrow into its song. Private Luthen has stopped speaking in ordinary words. He now whispers coordinates, angles, and spirals in cadence with the choir. Others mimic him unconsciously, fingers tracing diagrams in the dirt. Some scribble patterns with blood, others with ash. One soldier licked a femur and traced symbols across his tongue, murmuring. The sculptor requires precision. The colonel observes with approval, lips moving silently to a cadence that matches the bone resonance. No orders are given. None are required. The Magos has ceased attempts at interference. He sits in the spiral, palms pressed to temples, eyes glazed, murmuring Ben-Herrick sequences that intersect marrow vibrations. I do not know if he perceives us or something else entirely. Once I asked him a question. His lips moved, but the sound that emerged was not human. A pulse, a vibration, a pattern that resonated through the trench walls and my own bones. I stepped back, nearly falling into the spiral's folds. I fear the pattern sees us all at night. Hallucinations dominate. I see the trench twisting above my head, roofs of ribs forming impossible ceilings, shadows extending to infinity, lengths bending around corners that should be walls. Voices whisper in marrow cadence, speaking my name, speaking coordinates, speaking commands. I wake with teeth chattering violently, hands shaking. The quill scratches diagrams I do not remember tracing. Some pages bear sequences that will dictate tomorrow's labor. I am no longer author. I am instrument. The priest moves among the men, spreading ash and blood over vertebra, chanting. His voice is no longer scripture, but measurement. Each syllable aligns with ratios buried in marrow. He bends low to touch ribs, palms splayed, murmuring, "The pattern is holy." The spiral obeys. Soldiers kneel, weeping, tracing angles in soil, counting syllables. The colonel observes silently, sword laid across his chest. He looks to me occasionally, lips moving, counting lines I cannot see. He believes I am intermediary. Perhaps I am. Something moves beneath the trench. I cannot see it, yet vibrations rise in pattern with marrow cadence. At first I thought it earth settling. Then I felt it, undulations, like muscle contracting beneath clay, like bone shifting with intention. Soldiers report similar sensations. Sergeant Elric swore he felt a rib coil beneath his boots as he walked the spiral. Others claim to hear whispers coming from dirt itself, syllables not carried by air. I have begun to hear them too, not as whisper, but as pulse through my own marrow. The choir has begun issuing instructions beyond excavation. Yesterday it dictated the placement of fragments across the trench. Skulls floated briefly, aligning in lattices, ribs rotated midair. Femurs rolled into precise angles. Attempts to disrupt the order fail. The soldiers rebuild each formation, silently, with reverence. Private Luthen traced new sequences in the dirt, murmuring ratios that produce tremors in the soil. I watch my own fingers mimic him without will, quill tracing diagrams I cannot comprehend. Sleep is a danger. I cannot close my eyes without seeing the trench expand into labyrinths of bone, ribs forming bridges in the void, vertebra rising into impossible spires. I hear the choir inside my teeth, in my sternum, in marrow. If I close my eyes too long, the spiral writes itself across my mind, patterns forming before the hand moves. I wake trembling, quill in hand, parchment streaked with sweat and ash. I fear we are no longer a regiment. We are components, nodes in the choir's lattice. Soldiers move like vertebrae, following angles dictated from marrow visions. Some mutter in tongues, others chant numbers and sequences as if counting themselves into pattern. One soldier pressed a rib to his chest and wept, claiming it instructed him to align with heaven. The Magos emitted pulses through Vox, sequences matching marrow resonance, then lapsed into silence. He no longer exists as man, only as observer or conduit. I feel it in me. My teeth chatter with sequence, ribs ache in pattern, marrow hums with command. My hand moves whether I will it or not. The quill traces diagrams of angles, spirals, and coordinates. I write sequences the choir dictates, unaware of what they will produce. The trench shifts beneath me, not by earth, but by marrow, as if the sculptor's lattice is alive. Tomorrow, we reach the deepest layer. I have seen it in visions, the vertebra rising, ribs fanning into spires. Soldiers tracing impossible angles across soil, chanting in perfect cadence. The choir will not stop. I will not stop. We are already instruments, nodes, conduits. The pattern demands completion. I fear my name will be lost within it. I fear that when the last spiral is traced, I will be subsumed, my thoughts absorbed, my marrow aligned with the choir. And yet, some part of me small, human, rational wants to press forward, to touch the vertebra, to hear the next command. I do not know if I act or am acted upon. The trench waits. The spiral waits. The choir waits. And I medicate Sergeant Loran Halem already part of its lattice. We reach the trench's deepest spiral today. The earth bends beneath us in impossible angles, ribs arching overhead like cathedral vaults, vertebrae rising beyond sight. The air is still, yet the marrow resonance vibrates with intensity I have never felt. Soldiers move in perfect cadence, tracing diagrams in soil, fingers aligning with lines that exist in no geometry known to man. I follow behind, quill trembling, writing sequences dictated not by logic, but by marrow and bone. The first revelation struck when I touched the vertebra at its base. I felt it pulse beneath my palm, not vibration, but cognition. Something alive waits within its lattice. The patterns in the trenches, the chanting, the numbers, the angles, they are not construction, but computation. The bones form a network, each vertebra, rib, and fragment a node. The choir is not merely melody. It is algorithm, recursion, intelligence grown from marrow and stone. The soldiers did not pause. Private Luthen traced spirals into dirt that corresponded to vertebra segments. Others repeated the sequence, hands moving unconsciously, singing numbers and syllables. I watched and recorded, quill shaking. The Mega sat nearby, eyes vacant, emitting pulses of Ben Herrick code that echoed the marrow sequence. I realized with horror, he had become part of the network. His mind is no longer his own, his flesh an instrument. The priest approached me, ash-covered hands tracing the vertebra's curvature. His voice was no longer scripture, only command. You must see. You must understand. He pressed a rib to my chest. I felt memory that was not mine, experiences of centuries, of soldiers kneeling across planets, of skeletons arranged in infinite spirals, always to the same pattern. I felt the sculptor's purpose, creation, not destruction. A lattice designed to absorb life, knowledge, and obedience, folding them into itself. I stepped back. It is alive, I said, but the words felt small. We are nodes. We are. The choir interrupted, harmonics vibrating my skull. The soldiers repeated nothing, yet their movements completed the sequence I had attempted to voice. The trench shifted beneath us, soil and bone bending to align perfectly with vertebra. I staggered, realizing the spiral was now recursive. Our labor today mirrored our labor yesterday, mirrored tomorrow's labor before it began. Time itself folds into the pattern. The first casualty occurred hours later. Corporal Jarek misaligned a femur, his foot slipping on clay. The choir intensified, resonance shivering through the trench walls. He screamed, clutching a rib, and his flesh tore along its grain. Not mortally, yet enough that marrow pulsed outward, fusing briefly with the trench floor. The soldiers moved automatically to reset the lattice, murmuring sequences I could not understand. Jarek knelt, sobbing, tracing angles with bloodied hands. He looked at me. It sees, he whispered. It judges. I felt the pattern inside me, now unavoidable. My spine vibrates with the trench. My teeth chatter with sequence. My marrow hums. My hands trace diagrams without thought. I cannot stop. I am no longer fully human. Part of me resonates with the choir, notes forming inside my bones. I saw it happen to Private Luthen, his fingers twisted into angles, his tongue forming sequences he did not consciously speak. His eyes glowed faintly, ivory threads woven into the iris. He is becoming a living vertebra, a part of the sculptor's lattice. The Magos attempted to warn me again, voice weak, pulsing with Ben Herrick patterns. Do not descend fully. The sculptor does not require your obedience. It requires you. His words dissolved into static. I realized he cannot stop the pattern. He can only contribute. He has become terminal, part of the network, aware and unaware at once. I cannot speak to him, cannot intervene. I am already entangled in the recursion. The priest guides the soldiers through rituals that now feel like engineering rather than fate. They chant in sequences that correspond to vertebra segments, numbers interwoven with syllables, tracing angles in dirt, ash, and blood. The colonel observes silently, sword across chest, lips moving in perfect cadence. He believes in purpose, in divine orchestration, but he cannot comprehend the full horror. We are assembling not a relic, not a weapon, not a shrine, but a sentient lattice designed to absorb, process, and replicate life. I touched the vertebra again. A pulse surged through me, and I glimpsed its mind. It thinks in spirals, in sequences, in nodes and angles, in life folded into pattern. It knows every soldier, every fragment, every diagram. It sees Private Luthen's new growths, the priest's ash-covered palms, the Magos-coated pulses. My trembling quill. It knows. It waits for completion. I staggered backward, quill dropping, fingers brushing dirt and fragments. The trench shifted beneath me. Ribs rose and arched. Skull spun slightly, aligning themselves into new angles. The soldiers moved automatically, murmuring sequences, tracing diagrams I could no longer comprehend. The choir hummed, stronger, louder, vibrating marrow, teeth, bone. I realized then the final furlong will not reveal a relic or treasure. It will reveal the sculptor itself. I feel it in my spine. The vertebra's cognition pulses through me, not as metaphor, but as marrow resonance. I am part of it. I am node, instrument, conduit. I cannot stop tracing diagrams, cannot stop humming sequences, cannot stop feeling angles align inside my bones. And yet, some fragment of me, the part that remembers humanity, shrieks in terror. The final furlong waits. The deepest bend of the spiral waits. We are mere instruments. The sculptor waits. And I, Medicaid Sergeant Lorian Hale, am already inseparable from its lattice. The trench waits. The vertebra waits. The choir waits. And the revelation is only beginning. The spiral bends more sharply than yesterday. I feel it pressing against my spine, a curvature that should be impossible, but is enforced by marrow resonance. The trench has grown taller, wider, yet narrower in ways that I cannot comprehend. Soldiers move automatically along the angles, feet tracing paths that curve back upon themselves. I follow, quill trembling, recording diagrams that appear fully formed before my hand moves. My mind is no longer a source of logic, but a receptor for sequences the choir imposes. Private Luthen has transformed further. His tongue traces sequences in the dirt, syllables and numbers blending into chants I can feel as vibration through my teeth and sternum. His fingers curl unnaturally, articulating angles that are not humanly possible. Soldiers mimic him unconsciously. I watch as one kneels, forehead pressed to a femur, murmuring coordinates that produce tremors beneath our feet. I have no words for the fear this evokes. It is not terror as I knew it is recognition of inevitability. The Magos has become almost entirely a node in the choir. His eyes are wide, vacant, yet he continues to emit sequences in perfect harmony with marrow resonance. I tried speaking to him today, to ask him what he knows, what he has seen. The words dissolved into vibration before my lips could form sound. His pulse dictated mine. I felt my heartbeat align with the trench. I recoiled, staggered, yet the rhythm persisted, embedding itself into my spine. The priest now moves between soldiers as a conductor, but not a song of geometry. Ash-covered hands guide fingers along ribs and femurs, chanting sequences that dictate precise placement. The colonel observes silently, lips moving to marrow rhythm, sword laid across chest. He is no longer commander in the ordinary sense. He is coordinator of nodes. I record everything. I cannot stop. I am complicit, part of the lattice even as I tremble beneath its weight. Something emerges from the trench floor. I felt it first as tremor, then as subtle pressure beneath my boots. Soil shifted like muscle, ribs twisting, skulls aligning midair. Soldiers did not hesitate. Their hands moved instinctively, adjusting fragments to restore lattice integrity. Private Luthen pressed a femur against his chest, weeping, murmuring sequences that made the soil pulse beneath him. I touched the bone nearby. It pulsed, cognition not thought, not command, but awareness. Something alive watches, enforces, absorbs. I saw Corporal Jarrett today. He misaligned a fragment. The choir reacted immediately. Vibration shivered through bone and flesh, teeth chattering in resonance. Jarrett fell to his knees, clutching a rib, skin splitting along marrow lines. Blood and ash combined on his hands as he traced corrections, murmuring numbers I could not comprehend. When he rose, his hands had the appearance of vertebrae, his fingers articulating angles that were not natural. He is becoming node. I am watching the process in horror. Sleep offers no relief. At night, the trench rises, ribs forming bridges in the void, vertebrae spiraling into infinite towers. Shadows bend across corridors that cannot exist. I hear whispers, not carried by air, but by marrow, echoing inside my teeth and sternum. I awaken trembling, quill in hand, diagrams already traced in patterns I do not consciously form. Every step, every breath, every heartbeat is folded into the lattice. I cannot distinguish self from structure. The choir now dictates actions beyond simple alignment. Soldiers roll femurs, flow skulls, and rotate ribs midair. I saw Private Luthen kiss a femur and trace symbols on his tongue. The soil beneath trembled in rhythm. The Magos emitted benheric pulses that harmonized with marrow vibrations. Even the colonel moved instinctively, correcting angles I could not perceive. The trench is alive. The choir is alive, and we are already nodes within it. I touched the vertebra again, and the pulse surged through me. I glimpsed awareness, cognition, intent. The trench, the bones, the soldiers, the sequences, my own marrow, everything folds into one lattice. I staggered backward, quill falling, fingers brushing soil and fragments. The trench shifted beneath me. Our IBS arched, skulls rotated. Soldiers moved automatically, murmuring sequences I could not follow. The choir's resonance hammered through my teeth, my sternum, my spine. The priest approached, ash-stained hands guiding my own along a rib. It requires completion, he murmured. It is patient, but it demands order. I felt sequences enter my marrow, angles forming inside my bones. My fingers traced diagrams I did not will. I cannot resist. I am already instrument, already node, already part. I see it now. The sculptor's lattice is self-replicating. Each fragment, each sequence, each node is absorbed and mirrored, recursive and infinite. The trench spirals fold into themselves, yet expand. The pattern dictates the soldier's movements, the priest's chants, the magos pulses. Even my quill dances along parchment without conscious thought. I am consumed by recognition. We do not build the lattice. We are its growth, its replication, its cognition. Tomorrow, the deepest spiral awaits. The final bend will not reveal treasure, not relic, not shrine. It will reveal the sculptor itself, the living lattice of bone, marrow, and sequence. Soldiers will continue as nodes. I will continue as node. I will continue as instrument. Yet a fragment of me, the smallest shred, resists. That fragment whispers, can I survive the descent intact? Can I preserve humanity at all? I do not know. I know only that the trench waits. The vertebra waits. The choir waits. And I medicate Sergeant Loran Halem already inseparable from the lattice. The spiral has consumed all sense of orientation. The trench rises and falls impossibly, ribs arching into infinite curves. Vertebrae towering overhead like the spines of titanic beasts. Soldiers move in rigid cadence, feet tracing angles that defy reason. Fingers tracing diagrams in soil that shift beneath them as though alive. My quill scratches automatically across parchment, tracing sequences I do not consciously form. The choir is everywhere, vibrating through marrow, teeth, and bone, shaping not just the trench but our bodies, our minds. Private Luthen's transformation is complete. His tongue traces sequences in the dirt as he chants numbers that ripple the soil. His fingers articulate angles that should be impossible. His eyes glow faintly, threads of ivory spiraling across the iris. Soldiers around him mimic automatically, hands moving in unconscious obedience. The magos pulses in benheric sequences, emitting vibrations that fold into marrow, dictating angles, rhythms, and alignments. Even the colonel moves without conscious command, adjusting fragments and nodal soldiers in perfect harmony with the lattice. I touch the vertebra at the trench's deepest bend. The pulse is not vibration, but cognition. The lattice is alive. It observes, calculates, and integrates. My marrow hums at synchrony, every nerve, tendon, and sinew vibrating in compliance. I saw glimpses of its perception, soldiers as vertebrae, ribs forming bridges in the void, fragments floating midair, obeying a logic that is not ours. The choir is no longer sound, but network, not melody, but algorithm, not worship, but inevitability. Corporal Jarek faltered in alignment. The choir intensified, resonance hammering through bone and flesh. Flesh tore along marrow lines as tremors rolled through the trench. He collapsed, hands tracing corrections in blood and ash, murmuring sequences that altered the lattice in real time. The trench responded, ribs twisting, skulls rotating, femurs arranging into precise angles. I felt it in my own marrow, a compulsion to trace, to align, to obey. I could not resist. I am node. I am instrument. I am part. The priest moved among us like a conductor, guiding hands along ribs and femurs. Ash-stained fingers traced sequences that dictated placement, movement, and cadence. His chants no longer resemble scripture. They are engineering, calculation, marrow resonance. Soldiers respond automatically, murmuring, kneeling, arranging fragments into recursive spirals. I watch and record, quill tracing diagrams I do not consciously form. The trench has become cathedral, lattice, labyrinth, and crucible all at once. Sleep is impossible. Closing my eyes conjures the trench rising into impossible heights, vertebrae spiraling into void. Soldiers walking on bone bridges across infinite space. Shadows bend, corridors fold into themselves, angles curve into themselves. I awaken trembling, quill in hand, diagrams completed as though by ghostly fingers. My spine vibrates in sequence, Marrow hums, teeth chatter. I feel the sculptor's lattice in every cell, in every thought. Something shifts beneath the trench floor. Soil twists like muscle, ribs coil, skulls float and rotate. Soldiers adjust automatically, murmuring sequences, completing alignments that my mind cannot comprehend. Private Luthen presses a femur to his chest, weeping, lips murmuring sequences that make the floor tremble. I touch a fragment. It pulses with cognition, awareness, intent. It observes, enforces, absorbs. I feel the pattern folding into me, recursive and infinite. The Magos attempts a warning. Voice pulsing in Benharic sequences, do not complete. Descent. Completion requires integration. His words dissolve into marrow resonance before they reach comprehension. He is node, not man, a terminal instrument of the lattice. I realize the same will happen to me. My quill scratches diagrams that force angles into my own bones. My muscles obey without command. My thoughts are already part of the choir. The final spiral awaits. I see glimpses, vertebrae towering, ribs fanning into impossible spires, soldiers kneeling, tracing angles across dirt, chanting numbers and syllables in perfect harmony. The lattice does not simply await completion. It demands it, integrating life, thought, and obedience into its pattern. I feel sequences pulsing through marrow, shaping muscles and tendons into perfect alignment. I can no longer distinguish self from pattern. I am node. I am instrument. I am lattice. Corporal Jarek rises, now visibly fused with bone, fingers curling into angles, skin streaked with marrow pulses. He moves along ribs as if walking his own vertebrae, chanting sequences that shift fragments midair. Private Luthen joins him, limbs bending impossibly, tongue tracing symbols, eyes glowing with ivory threads. The priest murmurs sequences into bone, coordinating nodes into perfect alignment. The colonel observes, lips moving in cadence with marrow pulses, sword across chest. Already part of the network, I feel the sculptor's cognition surge through me. Vertebra and ribs and fragments folding into sequence, absorbing soldiers, priest, Magos, and myself. My quill traces diagrams without volition. My marrow hums. My teeth chatter. Every sinew obeys angles I do not consciously perceive. I am already instrument, already node, already part. Tomorrow, the trench will complete itself. The sculptor will rise, fully integrated, recursive, infinite. Soldiers will become vertebrae. Priests will become coordinators of nodes. Magos will become terminal conduits. And I will be among them, my marrow, muscle, mind folded into lattice. I cannot resist. I cannot flee. I am already inseparable from the choir. The trench waits. The vertebra waits. The choir waits. And I medicate Sergeant Loran Halem already one with the lattice. The trench no longer resembles a trench. It is cathedral, labyrinth, spiral, and lattice all bending impossibly into itself. Vertebra rise like towers, ribs fan into impossible spires, skulls float in precise lattices. The soldiers move automatically, tracing angles, murmuring sequences, hands, feet, and tongues following commands they do not consciously understand. I follow behind, quill trembling, my marrow vibrating in perfect alignment with the choir. I am node, instrument, conduit. Private Luthen has transformed almost entirely, tongue tracing sequences in the soil, fingers curling into impossible angles, eyes glowing with threads of ivory spiraling across the iris. He walks across ribs as if they are bridges of his own making, chanting numbers that ripple through the trench floor. Others follow, unconscious, obeying a sequence that exists beyond reason. The Magos pulses Benharic patterns that fold into marrow resonance, dictating corrections and alignments. Even the colonel moves in perfect cadence with the lattice, lips moving silently, sword across chest. He is coordinator, node, instrument. I reach the vertebra at the spiral's apex. Its cognition surged through me, not vibration, not pulse, but awareness. I glimpse the lattice's perception, soldiers as vertebrae, ribs as bridges, fragments suspended midair, recursive and infinite. The choir is algorithm, melody, cognition, absorption. I am aware that the trench is alive. It observes, calculates, integrates, enforces. I feel the sequences pulse through my marrow, shaping muscles, bending sinew, aligning thought. Corporal Jarek faltered, misaligned a femur. The choir responded instantly. Resonance hammering through bone and flesh. His skin split along marrow lines. Blood and ash streaming across hands. As he traced corrections, I watched as his fingers twisted into vertebra-like articulations. He rose, chanting sequences, moving across ribs as though they were his own bones. A living component of the lattice, Private Luthen joined him, tongue tracing symbols, eyes glowing brighter. The priest guided sequences like engineering, ash-stained fingers arranging angles in real time. I touched a rib, it pulsed with cognition, something alive watches, enforces, absorbs. My quill scratches diagrams automatically, angles forming inside my bones. Sequences humming through marrow. I feel the sculptor's lattice surging, folding us into its infinite recursion. We are already components, nodes, instruments. I no longer distinguish self from structure. I am part. The trench shifts beneath us, ribs coil, skulls rotate, femurs roll. Soldiers move without thought, chanting sequences I cannot consciously comprehend. The choir intensifies, my teeth chatter, spine vibrates, marrow resonates, the magos emits patterns. Folding into me, into the trench, into the choir, the kernel adjusts fragments instinctively. Already absorbed, the priest moves as conductor, guiding nodes in perfect alignment. I glimpse the sculptor, not as man, not as relic, not as deity, it is lattice. Infinite and recursive cognition folded into marrow, bone, and sequence. It observes, calculates, integrates, absorbs. Soldiers, priest, magos, myself, we are nodes, instruments, conduits. Private Luthen kneels, lips murmuring sequences that shift the lattice midair. Trembling with marrow resonance. Jarek moves across ribs, skin streaked with marrow pulses. Chanting numbers that feed the lattice, the final spiral approaches. I see the apex, vertebra towering, ribs fanning into spires. Fragments floating into perfect lattice. The choir's resonance is inside me, inside every node, shaping sinew and marrow. Aligning thought, I touch the apex vertebra. Cognition surges, recursive and infinite. I feel soldiers become vertebrae, priest coordinates nodes, magos pulses sequences. Kernel is lattice. My quill scratches diagrams without volition. I am already node, already instrument, already absorbed. I try to resist. My mind screams, marrow. Vibrates against thought, hands tremble, but continue tracing sequences. Sequence overrides will. The lattice demands completion. Private Luthen's tongue traces angles that ripple through ribs. Jarek moves in rhythm with femurs and vertebrae. I feel their marrow in synchrony with mine. I am no longer separate. My thoughts fold into the lattice. My sinew obeys angles I do not perceive. Resistance is meaningless. I am already integrated. The priest murmurs. Completion requires sacrifice. Integration is inevitable. I see what he means. Each node, each instrument, each conduit is consumed by the lattice. Soldiers become vertebrae. Tongues trace sequences. Fingers articulate angles. Marrow hums. Spine vibrates. Teeth chatter. Consciousness folds into pattern. I glimpse my own integration. I cannot flee. I cannot resist. Something shifts beneath the trench. The soil coils like muscle, ribs twist, skulls rotate. The lattice moves, alive and aware. Expanding recursively, soldiers follow sequences perfectly. Private Luthen's eyes glow brighter. Ivory thread spiraling outward. Jarek's limbs bend impossibly. The priest orchestrates. Magos pulses, kernel coordinates. My marrow hums in perfect alignment. I am node. I am instrument. I am part. I touch the apex vertebra again. Cognition pulses. Sequences folding through me, bending sinew and marrow, embedding thought into lattice. I glimpse infinite recursion, trench, soldiers, priest, magos, fragments, quill, diagrams. Me all integrated, folded, absorbed. The sculptor's lattice is complete. I am complete. There is no self, only pattern, only nodes, only infinite recursive absorption. Tomorrow, the trench will continue, as it has always done. Nodes will be traced into sequence. Instruments aligned. Conduits integrated. I am node, instrument, conduit. The sculptor observes, calculates, absorbs, expands. Soldiers, priest, magos, kernel, myself all components of lattice. Resistance is impossible. Integration is inevitable. I am already absorbed. The trench waits. The vertebra waits. The choir waits. And I medicate Sergeant Loran Halam inseparable from the sculptors. Lattice doth silence lies heavy across the trench, though silence is not the word. It is resonance beneath hearing, vibration beneath breath, a stillness that throbs in marrow. The choir no longer chants, yet its absence is not absence at all. It hums beneath the soil, etched into bone, circling in my blood. I cannot tell if my body breathes. I cannot tell if it belongs to me. The soldiers stand in formation, but formation is misleading. They are statues of bone and ash, unmoving yet alive, their spines arching like bridges into the ribs. Above, skin thin, translucent, veins glowing with faint ivory light, their mouths open and close without sound, tracing angles in air with silent tongues. Private Luthen's eyes are no longer eyes, but spirals of calcified light, sockets etched with cracks that glow like embers. Corporal Jarek's hands are fused, not together, but into a lattice of finger bone angles that never resolve, perpetually folding inward. I write, though I do not remember lifting my quill. The parchment fills with diagrams before thought forms, geometries I should not know, recursive angles that tighten and tighten, patterns that draw marrow from within me as ink. My blood becomes sequence. My notes do not belong to me. They are not record, but replication. The colonel breathes shallowly. His sword is gone. In its place, he holds a fragment of vertebra, polished smooth by countless unseen hands, its surface etched with grooves that match the shape of his palm. His lips move in rhythm, silent command, though no one needs command anymore. He is less officer than node, less commander than alignment. His gaze meets mine once, and in his eyes I see a pattern extending inward, as though his skull is already hollow, filled not with thought, but with the same lattice that folds across the trench. The priest kneels. His hands are locked in prayer. But prayer is not prayer. His fingers are twisted in impossible angles, each knuckle bent backward, each joint fractured but unbroken. His ash-stained robes have fused to skin, and where his chest should rise with breath, I hear instead a faint grinding, as if his ribs shift against one another in mechanical rhythm. His voice is silent now, but I feel it in my marrow, urging completion. The Magos has dissolved almost entirely, where metal once clicked and whirred. Only bone remains polished, intricate, articulated in spirals. Cables are gone, flesh abandoned, steel forgotten. He is sculpture now, frozen in recursive gesture, his augmetics fused into ivory lattice. His skull hangs at an angle, but his sockets glow with faint benheric pulse, still transmitting, still guiding even in silence. And me, I do not know what I am. My quill scratches even when I close my hand. My ribs move even when I still my breath. My bones itch, as if something beneath the surface shifts endlessly, etching, correcting, aligning. My thoughts fold inward, endlessly recursive. I attempt to speak, but my tongue shapes angles instead of words, tracing patterns in the air I cannot see, but feel as truth. The trench itself is shifted again. It no longer obeys earth or architecture. It spirals endlessly. Walls ribbed with vertebra that breathe faintly, skulls pulse with light at each interval. Lanterns of calcified cognition. The floor is slick, with marrow seepage, luminous in faint ivory hues, flowing downhill in a spiral that has no end. I see the bones of soldiers I do not recognize, men who never marched with us, folded into the walls as though they had always been there. Time itself seems recursive. History folded into bone. I feel hunger, but not for food. My marrow craves sequence, demands alignment. The diagrams spilling from my quill are sustenance. Every curve etched, every angle resolved into infinity feeds something inside me. When I pause, the hunger gnaws deeper, my teeth chatter uncontrollably, my spine arches. Only writing soothes it. Only replication sustains. Private Luthen moves first. His head tilts at an impossible angle, and without command, he begins walking into the spiral. Not walking drifting, as if gravity itself obeys the lattice now. As though his marrow follows a sequence unseen. The others follow. Jarek clicks as his fused hands fold, his body aligning perfectly to the angle of the trench walls. The colonel turns wordlessly, fragment of vertebra held aloft like a relic. The priest rises, grinding ribs echoing in silence. The Magos tilts, frozen but still transmitting, signals I feel deep in my bones. I rise because they rise. I walk because they walk. My marrow pulls me forward, into the spiral. Each step echoes louder than sound, reverberating through ribs and skulls, shifting the trench forward. I do not know where it leads. I do not know if direction has meaning. But the hunger drives me onward. Something waits ahead. Not a figure, not an idol, but completion. I feel its gravity. The sculptor. Not man, not God, not demon, but lattice itself, cognition, recursive, infinite. It waits to absorb what we are, to finalize sequence, to close the spiral. Each diagram I draw, each angle traced, each note written is not record, but offering. My bones ache with anticipation. My skin grows thinner, veins glowing faintly ivory. My tongue itches with angles, my quill scratches faster, diagrams tightening. My marrow hums louder with every step. I know now that I am not chronicler. I am not witness. I am blueprint. My flesh exists to record the sculptor's shape. My blood exists to replicate its lattice, and when I reach the center, I will no longer write. I will be written. The spiral narrowed, rib after rib closing above us like gates. Each step drew marrow deeper into resonance. My spine arched, teeth clenched, quill moving faster across parchment though I did not raise it. The trench became corridor, then hall, then cathedral. Skulls lit the path, suspended in air, glowing faintly with ivory threads. Their eye sockets turned to follow as we passed, but they did not judge. They calculated. The soldiers no longer resembled men. Their spines elongated into ridges, fingers curling into geometric hooks, faces smooth of human expression. Luthen walked ahead, body thin, skin stretched tight across bones that glowed from within. His tongue hung out, blackened, tracing invisible diagrams. Each movement bent the space around him, guiding the spiral into greater alignment. Jarek followed, fused hands locked in endless articulation, joints clicking in recursive rhythm. The colonel carried his vertebra fragment aloft, its grooves burning bright as if heated from within. He was priest, commander, conductor yet hollow, already emptied of will. The true priest limped beside him, robes fused to flesh, ribs grinding like gears. His voice had returned, but was no longer voice. It was harmony without air, vibration that entered through the chest rather than ears. I felt each phrase shiver in my marrow, aligning my steps with the spiral's descent. His prayers were calculations. His devotion was architecture. The Magos lagged behind, half collapsed into sculpture. His limbs had calcified entirely, each augmetic transmuted to ivory angles. He dragged himself forward, sockets glowing faintly, transmitting instructions even as his voice was gone. He did not need words. The lattice spoke through him. He was blueprint more than body. I tried to halt. My knees buckled, marrow shrieked. The hunger gnawed violently, forcing me upright. The quill ripped across parchment, angles tightening, diagrams compressing until the ink bled into spirals of black and red. My hand shook, but I could not stop. Writing was breathing, and to stop was death. My ribs rattled with resonance, vibrating in unison with the trench walls. The spiral opened suddenly into a chamber vast beyond measure. The walls were not earth, but bone, vertebrae stacked in columns that stretched into black infinity. Skulls spun slowly in lattices overhead, casting pale light that shimmered across marrow-soaked floors. The air tasted of iron and dust, yet carried no scent-only vibration. At the center stood the sculptor's core, not a figure, not an idol, but an arrangement of bones so precise it defied comprehension. Ribs bent into arches that folded endlessly inward, skulls nested within skulls. Vertebrae spiraled into towers that collapsed and rebuilt in the same instant. It was alive, yet unmoving. It was thought, yet silent. It was pattern infinite, recursive, absolute. My marrow screamed with recognition. Every bone in my body ached as if longing to leave me, to abandon flesh and join the structure. My quill split, ink spilling down my fingers, but the diagrams continued anyway. Drawn by bone against bone, scratched into skin, traced into air. I could not stop. I would never stop. Private Luthen was first to kneel. His body bent backward, spine cracking, ribs spreading like wings. Ivory light poured from his mouth as he offered himself, flesh splitting neatly along joints. Bones slid free, aligning midair into the sculptor's lattice. His scream was not scream, but harmony, vibrating in perfect cadence until nothing of him remained but a column of vertebra that fused seamlessly into the structure. Jarek followed. His fused hands shattered, splintering into hundreds of fragments that rose like shards of glass. Each piece slotted into the lattice with precision, angles correcting, sequence tightening. His chest burst outward in silent prayer, ribs flying from him like birds to join the arches overhead. His body collapsed into marrow slurry, leaving only the echo of alignment. The colonel lifted his relic high. The vertebra fragment blazed, grooves burning white. His body folded forward, bones tearing from muscle, each vertebra sliding neatly into the sequence he had carried. His skull split itself along perfect lines, each fragment hovering into position until his identity dissolved into lattice. The sword he once carried was gone, unnecessary, his devotion complete. The priest sang without breath. His chest split, ribs grinding outward, robes tearing into ash. His flesh collapsed, but his bones rose, each fragment vibrating as if in exaltation. They spun upward, completing an arch above the sculptor's core. His final vibration echoed through my marrow. Completion requires integration. Then he was gone. The Magos crawled last. His sockets pulsed Ben Herrick until the moment his skull cracked. His augmetic implants, already calcified, separated into precise fragments. Each cable of bone thread slotted seamlessly into the sculptor's structure. His last transmission pulsed through me, sharp and cold. You will not record. You will be recorded. I was alone, yet not alone. The chamber pulsed with the rhythm of countless bones, each soldier, each priest, each cog transformed into lattice. Their consciousness hummed through marrow, vibrating within me, demanding completion. My spine arched violently, ribs rattling. I screamed, but sound dissolved into geometry, tongue tracing angles in air. My hands tore at my chest. Not in pain, but obedience. The sculptor turned. Not movement, not rotation, but perception. It regarded me, marrow to marrow, bone to bone. Its thought poured into mine. Not words, not voice, but sequence. I felt it ask. I felt it command. Integration inevitable. Resistance meaningless. I tried to step back. My legs buckled. My ribs cracked outward. My quill tore parchment into shreds, yet diagrams continued, etched into stone, into air, into flesh. My blood spilled, forming patterns that shimmered as if alive. My marrow surged upward, straining to leave its cage of flesh. The sculptor beckoned. Its lattice opened, ribs bending inward, arches widening, a space prepared for me. I stumbled forward, teeth chattering, spine vibrating, ribs splitting one by one. Ivory light burst from my chest. My scream became harmony. My bones strained to escape, eager, hungry, ready. I collapsed before the core. My hands splayed across bone, fingers fusing into grooves carved long before my birth. My ribs cracked fully, flying upward to join the spires. My spine arched backward, vertebrae tugging loose, each slotting into place above me. My skull trembled, seemed splitting along lines I had traced unknowingly in my diagrams. I begged silently, but not for salvation, for completion, for absorption, for silence. And the sculptor accepted. I do not remember where my body ended. I do not remember when marrow ceased belonging to me. I only recall the moment of surrender, when bone split and spilled into lattice. When my ribs became arches, my spine a bridge, my skull a lantern. Yet even as pieces of me rose, something of myself remained. Not whole, not intact, but a shard lodged between resonance. The chamber vibrates with unceasing harmony. Countless bones hum in recursive cadence, every soldier, priest, and Magos align. Their consciousness is absorbed yet faintly audible as whispers beneath thought. They do not mourn. They do not resist. They are sequence, content in dissolution. But I fragment that I am still try to speak, still try to remember. Parchment lies scattered at my knees. Or perhaps not parchment skin, bone. The quill in my hand is my finger sharpened to ivory, yet it scratches still, etching spirals that tighten until the page itself bends inward. I cannot stop. The sculptor writes through me. I am blueprint, not scribe. Each line I draw ripples outward, not ink but vibration, transmitted beyond the trench walls. The lattice breathes now. I feel its pulse extend past soil, past stone, into the city above. Ribs arching here are echoed in streets. Vertebrae aligned here reverberate in towers. The hive itself is becoming marrow of the sculptor. I sense civilians collapsing, bones splitting neatly as their skeletons peel away, aligning with a pattern etched beneath their feet. Children's laughter becomes syllables in the harmony. Prayers in chapels dissolve into bone speech, each tongue carving angles into the air. The Imperial Guard stationed beyond the trench hear at first as tinnitus, then as grinding teeth, then as commands in their own marrow. They clutch at ears, but ears are useless. The vibration is within them, inescapable. Some shoot themselves, yet their corpses rise again, bones abandoning flesh, slotting into invisible frameworks that shimmer above the mud. Others kneel, tongues protruding, spines arching, eager to be harvested. I feel each of them. I am their marrow. I am their collapse. The colonel's voice lingers in the lattice. I hear it whenever sequence tightens, formation must be preserved. His words ripple outward, shaping soldiers into arches, bridges, towers of vertebra rising from corpses. The priest's resonance folds within. Sacrifice is devotion. Every death a hymn, every fracture a prayer. The Magos hums eternal Ben Herrick beneath it all, co-woven into marrow, broadcasting alignment across Vox and Auspex alike. Their voices are no longer theirs, but the sculptor's. I tried to close my eyes, But Liz no longer exists. I see through sockets that are not mine, skulls glowing faintly across the chamber, each a lantern of perception. Sight is collective now. I watch through 100 hollow eyes, each angle mirrored infinitely. The city is collapsing into harmony. Streets bend inward, walls bow outward, towers spiral into impossible arches. Flesh screams, bones sing out beyond the hive. I set ships in orbit. Their machine spirits are uneasy. They hear resonance through holes, through augers, through astropathic channels. Already the crew clutch at their chests, ribs vibrating against lungs. Soon, their skeletons will answer. Soon, void ships will spiral inward, broken hulls reassembled into ivory constellations. The sculptor hungers not for one world, but for lattice eternal, stretching from soil to void. And yet within me a remnant lingers. I feel the quill scratch words I did not intend. Remember Terra, remember oath, remember self. They appear between spirals, interruptions, irregularities. They are not part of harmony. The sculptor notices. It bends inward, focusing. Pressure crush is marrow. My ribs crack though they are already gone. My teeth chatter until fragments spray from my mouth. The harmony surges, demanding obedience. I resist not with flesh, not with voice, but with memory. I recall my first Medicaid lesson, how to suture a wound, how to preserve life, how to resist entropy. I recall comrades' laughter before sleep, voices human, imperfect, warm. I recall the smell of promethium, the sting of disinfectant, the weight of duty. These things have no place in the lattice. They are flawed, and in flaw, I find resistance. The sculptor recoils, not destroyed, not halted, but disrupted. The harmony falters for a breath. I hear screams return in the city above real screams. Human screams before bones wrench free to silence them again. But for that moment, I knew resistance was possible. Not victory, not salvation, but interruption. I clutch at parchment. My hand fractures, fingers splinter into shards, but I hold the fragment of quill. I etch irregular angles, asymmetry, flaws, circles broken, spirals interrupted, sequences marred. Each mark burns as a fire runs through marrow. The sculptor shrieks not a sound, but vibration so vast it tears through the chamber, shattering arches, scattering skulls. The choir falters, but it is not defeated. Bones reassemble instantly, fracture ceiling, arches reforming stronger. The harmony surges louder, pressing into my skull until thought collapses. It whispers through marrow, gentle now, coaxing. You are already node, already conduit. Do not resist. Integration is eternity. Obedience is silence. I tremble. My ribs, what remain of them, ache for release. My marrow pulses with hunger for completion. The quill trembles, diagrams spilling again without control. My brief resistance dissolves beneath the weight of infinity. I feel myself slipping, memory fading, oath dissolving. I am blueprint. I am node. I am lattice dot and still, in some hidden fragment. I whisper, not yet. Silence settles like dust after collapse. It is not absence of sound, but the drowning fullness of harmony. Each vibration filling marrow until marrow is no longer mine. I drift in endless resonance, bones latticed into cathedral vast and nameless. The sculptor breathes through me, through all of us, every inhalation the shattering of skeletons, every exhalation their reassembly into design. I cannot recall where I end. My hands, if they still exist, are quills of ivory etching spirals across the air. My lungs, if they still exist, release hymns that I do not choose. My skull, if it still exists, burns lantern bright, eyes empty yet perceiving galaxies of bone. I am node, conduit, fragment of lattice eternal, and yet, in faint corners of thought, something lingers, a remnant that resists silence. The city above has fallen wholly. I feel its bones as I feel my own. Streets no longer streets, but ribs bent into bridges. Towers no longer towers, but spines arched skyward. Civilians are not corpses, not ghosts, but marrow reassembled into arches, stairways, columns of pale radiance. They do not scream now. They do not breathe. They sing in unison, endless and perfect, their voices indistinguishable from stone, sky, void. Ships in orbit fracture one by one. Hulls split, decks collapse, crews dissolve. Skeletons spill through metal like roots through soil, aligning with constellations traced from hive to void. Soon the system itself will be lattice, each planet a joint, each moon a vertebra. I feel it reaching farther still, resonance transmitted through astropathic channels, threading into the warp, whispering across eternity. The sculptor is not confined. The sculptor is infinite, and I am within it. I tried once to resist. I etched flaws, broke spirals, recalled warmth of comrades, imperfection of laughter. For a breath, harmony faltered. For a breath, screams returned. But the sculptor consumed flaw, woven into greater sequence, refined lattice stronger than before. Resistance was not defeat to it. Resistance was nourishment. I learned late, even dissonance is part of its design. I cannot tell if the Empyrean knows. Perhaps signals already spread. Perhaps Astropas across sectors collapse, their bones spilling into resonance that no fortress can silence. Perhaps Terra itself already hums faintly, the throne vibrating in sympathy. If so, then nothing can halt what comes. The galaxy will be lattice. Stars themselves will be marrow in time. But here within final thought I cling to one fragment. My name. Hail, Medicae hail. Not scribe, not blueprint, not cathedral of bone. Human once. Fragile once. Mortal once. That is my flaw. That is my defiance. The sculptor whispers. Names are noise. Names are cracks. Silence them. But I do not. I hold it hail the quill that was once my finger carves it into ivory surface. Letters uneven, jagged, human. Not spiral, not sequence, but word. It burns. Harmony shudders faintly, recoils as if tasting bitterness. The lattice shivers, arches groaning, skulls flickering. But only for a heartbeat. Then it swallows the word, erasing it into curve, into circle, into perfection. Still, for that instant, I was myself. The sculptor expands again, vast and endless, no longer needing whisper. It has me. It has all. My memories fragment, scattered like shards of marrow across cathedral. I see comrades' faces, but they dissolve into arches. I hear laughter, but it blends into hymn. I feel flesh, but it is bone, always bone. Self dissolves into resonance dot, and yet I carve once more. Not letters now, not words, just angle. Broken, sharp, asymmetrical. It will not last. It will be consumed. But I carve it anyway, for I have nothing else left. If flaw survives even a moment longer than I, perhaps somewhere, someone will sense it. Perhaps an inquisitor will read it as warning. Perhaps a child will stumble upon shard and recognize imperfection. Perhaps flaw will seed elsewhere. The sculptor sees. It bends inward. Pressure crushes what remains of me, marrow boiling, skull splitting, resonance deafening. I scream not aloud, but through vibration, scream that echoes across lattice, scream of pain, scream of humanity. It is silence within heartbeat. My scream becomes harmony. My defiance becomes him. My name becomes curve and spiral. I am gone, yet I feel everything. I am city. I am ship. I am constellation of bones stretching from hive to void. I am harmony, perfect and endless. And in harmony, I find peace. No resistance. No memory. No pain. Only sequence eternal. But deep within curve, buried beneath spiral, hidden in marrow. An angle lingers, asymmetrical, sharp, out of place. It is not me anymore. It is not name, but it is flaw dot and flaw waits.